Welcome to Mind Over Matter, where we feature young Jamaicans who are shooting for the stars. Today, we explore the intricate world of the brain, which is the most complex and fascinating organ in the human body. My guest is a 25-year-old neuroscientist. She's a past student of the St. Andrew High School for Girls and the Agnes Scott College in the United States. She's presently pursuing a PhD at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where her research focuses on how the immune system in the brain contributes to the severity of the symptoms seen in patients with neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. She shares her journey, sheds light on her research, and tells us about the latest findings on the workings of the brain. My guest is Jhodi Webster. Welcome to Mind Over Matter, Jhodi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man, and I'm looking forward to this interview, because this brain and neuroscience, I have an interest in it. So I'm just looking forward to hear everything that you have to say. But first, tell my viewers, what is neuroscience?
So neuroscience is simply just the study of the brain. So neuro refers to anything in the brain. You have the neurons, which are the brain cells, and studying neuroscience is just studying everything that has to do with the brain, whether that's the cells in the brain, the different brain regions, what could be coming into the brain, what's going out of the brain, and especially, which is really important to our field, what's happening during disease of the brain.
Okay. So how and when did this interest in neuroscience start?
Good question. So I actually did not think that I would end up in this field. I honestly did not really know that pursuing neuroscience was a thing. So obviously starting at Andrews, I always had an interest in science. Like I was never into like business and accounting and that kind of thing. That was never my thing. It was always science. And so I knew that I wanted to go to college in the States. But I, knowing that I liked science, I was like, okay, I'll just be a doctor. Like I'll do pre-med, I'll do 4 years of undergrad, and then I'll go to med school. And so during my time at Agnes Scott, I took a class. It was a specific class. It was like molecular biology or something like that, where it had a lab component. And the professor of the class was a trained neuroscientist, and she gave us a project in the lab that was looking at some samples from autism spectrum mouse tissue. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like we get to look at brain tissue, we get to look at like an animal's brain. And after that class, she actually invited me to do more research with her in the lab. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like I didn't even know this was a thing. I'm still going to pursue like pre-med. But it was an opportunity and I obviously was not going to say no. So through that experience, I got deeper and deeper into neuroscience. I was finding out things about the brain that blew my mind.
Yes.
I got to hold a human brain, like physically hold a human brain. And I was like, no, this is it. Like, this is so cool. Of all the parts of your body that you could study and explore, I'm using my brain to study the brain. And that was really, really interesting to me. So I ended up changing my major from biology on a pre-med track to neuroscience and decided that I no longer wanted to pursue an MD. Because funny enough, the same summer that I started doing research, I also shadowed a doctor. He's also a Jamaican in Atlanta, at the hospital there. And I did not like it. I did not like it one bit. I almost fainted one day. It was just too much. It was just too much. And I had a genuine interest in being in the lab and doing experiments and seeing what we could find. And if the experiment failed, what can we do different? Just that's where my thinking was. And so that's kind of how it started. And then decided to go to grad school. I just thought that the obvious next step was to pursue my PhD, to, study more specifically another aspect of neuroscience. If that makes sense. Yeah.
All right, but take me back to St. Andrew High School. Tell me about your experience there, and how you got to Agnes Scott.
Yeah, so wow, looking back at it, me and my friends, and I still have the same, it's like the same group of friends from Andrews.
Yeah.
Me and my best friend, we always say, Lord, like we did not realize how good we had it at Andrews. Like we wish we could go back. Andrews was the best experience. I was really, really involved. I was senior prefect. As I said, I was really interested in all the sciences. I was president of the math club, like all these things. And big up Miss Reed. She was the best principal. But I really think that Andrews really cultivated this level of, it's kind of cliche to say, but just being hardworking and that the sky is the limit.
Yeah.
My sister, who went to Immaculate, she also came to school in the States. And knowing that I wanted to do med at the time, I didn't want to go straight to UE because I didn't think I was ready for med school.
Okay.
So I decided to, in sixth form, to start studying for the SATs. So I did SATs and I did ACT, which is a little similar, but a very different exam. It also has like a science component to it. So I did those two exams and decided to apply to schools. I applied to, I don't even know how many schools.
A whole lot.
A lot of schools. I was like, I must at least get into one. So decided to apply to a couple of schools and got into a few. And it was a little bit of a struggle because the schools that I was looking at, it was Agnes Scott and then it was a couple others. And Agnes Scott really stood out to me and my family.
Okay.
And I was like, no, I don't know, because Agnes Scott, it's a very small school. It's all women's, it's liberal arts. And I was like, I'm just coming from Andrews and I need like the full college experience. So me and mommy were like, girls. I was like, no, mommy, I don't want to go here. I can't do it. But my sister's husband had a friend that went to Agnes Scott, and they loved it, had no bad things to say about it. So I was like, all right, you know what? Why not? Let's go. They gave me a good scholarship. And I do not regret it one bit. I was really happy to be in a small university because I was able to have that one-on-one relationship with my professors and other students, and that's eventually how I got the research opportunities and figured out that I wanted to apply to grad school.
But what were some of the challenges that you had at Agnes Scott? Because you're gone, leave your family, friends, everybody is here. So tell me a little about that.
That was rough.
Yeah.
That was rough, and to this day it's still a little hard. As I said, I still kept in contact with all of my friends. We're all still very close, and it was hard for me alone to be in this big city, to be in Atlanta. And there's a good Caribbean scene in Atlanta, but I still just didn't feel like it was home, so I would go home at least once a year for Christmas or in the summer, which really helped. But then coming back, I was like, I know I'm here for a reason. I know that I have this great opportunity. But I'll be honest, there were days where it was really, really hard, and I just mentally was not there because I felt so alone, and it was just very hard to go through. But I'm so thankful for my friends. I'm thankful for FaceTime. My sister eventually moved to Atlanta. She got married here, and her husband moved to Atlanta. So it was so nice to have them in that space. And then now moving to Birmingham, which is really only 2 hours away from Atlanta, it's still nice because I can drive over there. And my mom will fly up and visit us. So that helps, but it's still hard.
Yes.
It's still hard. There's so many different things here. The food is not the same. The people are not the same. It's just, and the whole all the politics and the current
Yes.
environment. It's very taxing. It's very, very taxing. But I almost use my work, which I know probably isn't good. I almost use my work and my studying as a distraction, because I am really grateful for the opportunity that I have here, and I just kind of push through. I really don't have a choice.
Yeah. So did you encounter any sort of discrimination or, racism, that kind of thing?
I did. And it was when I first moved here. I think my first year at Agnes Scott. It's just, little comments by people, other students. And I was like, what is going on?
Yes.
I have never
Yeah, you would have
experienced
never experienced that here.
anything,
So, yeah.
anything like that. It's something that, as Jamaicans, we don't really experience in Jamaica. Not saying that there's not racism in Jamaica, but growing up, that was always something you see on the TV, like, oh, it's happening all across America. It's such a big thing. And then I come in now with my little self, and people are saying things to me about how I look and the color of my skin and what I must do and what I can't do. And I'm just like confused, so confused. And that also played a part in me feeling, alone, because I felt like I didn't have anybody who could actually understand or relate to how I was feeling as a Black person who wasn't African American. Like I was not born here. So it was rough.
At Agnes Scott, you received several awards. Tell us about that.
I did. So to go to Agnes Scott, I got the Founders Scholarship that paid for a good chunk of my tuition, which really, really helped. And then I think going into my third year, I got I think it was called the Neuroscience DuPont Award, which basically gave me funding to go to conferences, present the research that I was doing, and also gave me funding to do the research, to buy reagents and things for the experiment. And then got a couple awards for presenting my research there as well.
Let's talk about a little about the neuroscience aspect now. But in recent time, there has been a surge in interest in the human brain. What do you think has led to this growing fascination then?
Yeah, I think there's two sides of it. One is, I think that the field has always been interested in how we think. And it's not like another part of the body where you're able to kind of preserve the tissue, like, for example, after somebody passes, or kind of get that tissue while somebody is sick. You cannot live without your brain. So it's so hard to study it and see what's going on as a person ages. And then the other part of it is diseases of the brain are one of the most detrimental things that happens. And, while you have a disease in the brain, you kind of have other things going on in the body. But a lot of the times, for example, in my field where I study Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, you have the death of the neurons in these very specific brain regions, and they cause you to have memory loss. They cause you to not be able to make executive functions. They cause you to not be able to walk and have tremors and that kind of thing. And it's just detrimental to the quality of life in general. So it's definitely been a growing interest in the field of science in general to study neuroscience. There's a lot of overlap, I think, with other fields. For example, like what I do, I look at the immune system and then I look at the brain. There's people that look at the cardiovascular system and the brain, different things. The brain is always involved. Yeah.
And I think too, there's been an awareness to about mental health.
Yes.
So it seems as if that kind of persons don't want to find out more about the brain and how it works. All right. So advances in technology has allowed for new techniques for studying the brain. Could you tell us a little about that? And what are some of the latest findings in neuroscience?
Good question. So in terms of technology, there's so much that we can do now, so much. One of my favorites, we haven't started doing it in our lab yet, but we've seen a lot of people moving towards it, and we're excited to eventually move towards it, is sequencing. So RNA sequencing of the brain tissue, where you can just take a sample of the tissue and you can sort all the cells in that brain region. And that's really important because you're able to see, okay, if I have a healthy brain and I have a diseased brain, what genetic factors, what genetic expressions are increased or decreased in those two different brains. That's so important. I mean, we've always had brain imaging, and that's just been getting more and more advanced. There's so many biomarkers that you can use to image our brains right now. Before we were talking about, are there things that we could do to see if I could develop Alzheimer's in the future, or if I could, have this disease. One of the bigger things in the field is developing biomarkers, and using those biomarkers while people are still alive and healthy can help to predict whether or not they'll have those diseases. It's so important. And then the second question, I forgot. Sorry. So yeah, tell you off again.
I was what are the latest findings that changes what we usually think about or what we thought about the brain?
Yeah, good question. And I might be a little biased because I'll talk about, where my research is going.
Yeah.
But, so I think one of the latest and a very important finding is the aspect of immune privilege. And when I say immune privilege, I talk about, this is just something that has developed over time, where certain parts of the body can protect against an immune response, like the damaging effects of an immune response. And before, it was thought that the brain, as well as, the eyes and other parts of the body are immune privileged. So that means like they wouldn't have any damaging response by the immune system. But there has been so much evidence, especially in diseases, that the brain does have this immune response. And, that's what I studied, neuroinflammation, where in response to viruses, in response to pathogens, abnormal proteins, the brain, one, has its own immune cells, and it has the ability to allow for immune cells that are, circulating in the body to actually enter the brain. And that can either be good or bad, right? You need the immune system to fight off things and clear these things. But also, if you have that constant immune response, then that can be detrimental to the brain. And there's actually been studies, and especially things that we do in our lab, to show that this prolonged immune response can actually contribute to killing the brain cells and to progressing disease. And the field of neuroinflammation has blown up with that recently. And I think it's really important to move away from saying that the brain is immune privileged to saying that it could be selectively privileged, but there's definitely a role that the immune system is playing in the brain.
Okay. And that is a part of your research. Okay, so your research will lead to treatments.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. We've definitely found some very interesting results. And, the goal is to eventually use those results and the mechanisms that we're finding that the immune system is affecting these diseases to lead to potential therapeutic options.
Okay, so we've had, and I don't know how we'll answer this question, but we've had we have been taught certain things, way back in the day about the brain. So I'm going to run a few of them, and then you tell me whether or not this is true or false.
Oh God, okay. I hope I can answer it correctly.
Definitely. Okay. We hear this all the time. We only use 10% of our brains. Is that true? Of our brain?
I would say, and I hope other neuroscientists I would say that's a myth. I would say it is definitely likely that we don't use 100% of our brains, right? There's this thing that Albert Einstein used 20% or whatever percent of his brain. We don't use a lot of our brains, and as we grow older, we're able to, through plasticity and things like that, able to increase that usage. But Yeah, I don't know if it's 10% or if it's 12% or what it is. But yeah,
We
that's
use
my
a
answer.
lot more. Okay. All right. The right brain, if you are more creative, and the left, I guess for decision making and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Is that true that you can be right brained or left brained?
I don't think so. I
Mm.
think there might be some truth to that. And again, this
Mm.
goes back to the issue of how will we know? How will we know? I think there could be some truth to that, but
Mm.
yeah, I don't know about
Kind of
that.
iffy, kind of iffy.
Yeah, kind of iffy, because
Okay.
you do have different parts of like either your left or your right side of your brain that
Right.
have the same
Mhm.
function, and so
Different genders have different brains, meaning you can look at it and decide whether it's male or female.
that's a good one. I don't know if there's actually any evidence for that,
Right.
I do know that depending on, if you're a male or a female, that there are certain parts of your brain that develop at different rates.
Okay.
That has to do with hormones and all that stuff. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't think there's like a telling factor.
Right. Okay. I've heard that you're born with a certain amount of neurons, and
Mm.
some will die, but you won't get new ones. Is that so?
Um, I want to say yes. You won't necessarily get new neurons,
Mhm.
but over time you will always get new like connections between your neurons. So you
Okay.
always get new synapses, which is what the connection is called.
Oh.
And that's where the concept of like neuroplasticity comes in, where you're
Mhm.
constantly forming these new connections in your brain and that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
that one I'll say, yeah, closer
Okay.
to yes.
All right. So a little about the complexity of the brain. Why is it so difficult to understand how the brain works?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, one, it's a huge organ. It might not look as big in our heads, but it is
Mhm.
a big complex organ. Like if you look at the breakdown of the different parts of the brain, I don't even know like the number. There's probably hundreds
Mhm.
of different parts of the brain. And within those different parts of the brain, there are different types of neurons and there's different functions. And as I mentioned before, it's hard to study that when
Mhm.
humans need it to survive. You can't take out somebody's brain and study it and then get them back. It's not going to work.
Mhm.
So that adds to the complexity of it. But
Mhm.
we're trying our best, which is why it's really good that in science we're able to use animal models. So for example, I work with mice who obviously we don't have the same brain as a mouse,
Right.
but there are very
Some similar things.
there are similarities in the parts of the brain that they have and then the functions that those parts of the brain have with humans. So we're able to study that. So there's a lot more that we know now about the brain that we did before because of animal models, but I don't think we'll ever get to know everything, honestly.
Mhm. So, saying that then, when it comes to artificial intelligence, what extent then will it be possible for AI to replicate the functionality and of the human brain? Because we hear that every day. That I think is that possibly a thing?
I think it's already happening.
Wow.
As scary as it seems, I think it is already happening.
Mhm.
Like even over the weekend, I see some AI generated images that I even had to like second guess. I'm like, oh wait, that's not real.
Yeah.
It's not real. And there's different software now, like
Mhm.
Chat GPT, which is a full AI generated software where you can
Yeah.
give it any prompt and it will just reel it off to you.
Mhm.
So I do think it's happening. Like the computer scientists and engineers have really gone a long way in developing and making AI more efficient. And I think we're finally at that point, that like futuristic point
Mhm.
where AI can literally replace our brains and what we do as humans.
Wow, exciting future.
Exciting, scary, yeah.
Yes. Well, maybe I won't be here to experience all of that. I leave you to it now.
Oh God.
So I have here now, in terms of your research, why did you choose the Parkinson and Alzheimer's to concentrate on?
Yeah. So, interestingly, I didn't think that I would end up studying Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases, because when I started research, I actually studied neurodevelopmental diseases, so more like autism spectrum disorders, Rett syndrome, things like that. And I was really interested in it because on that side of things, they're a little bit more weird, and you're studying what happens when the brain doesn't develop properly. So from birth, and how that can manifest into these diseases over the period of your life. It was actually my interest in inflammation in the brain that kind of bridged me to the neurodegenerative side. So for my senior thesis in college, I started looking at neuroinflammation in these autism spectrum models. And then when I got to UAB, when you start in the PhD program, you kind of rotate in labs. So you kind of do a couple of weeks to see if, you like the lab, if you like the project. And the lab that I chose, the lab that I'm in now, they did neuroinflammation, but they did it in Parkinson's disease. And Parkinson's I had heard of, but it wasn't as, I want to say, it wasn't as popular, like at least to me, as Alzheimer's was. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's a disease of the brain where you still get that loss of neurons, but it's in a completely different brain region. It does affect cognition and memory like Alzheimer's does, but it also affects your motor symptoms, which makes it really difficult for patients. And I just was really, really interested in it. And especially the fact that whatever we find in Parkinson's, especially with what my project is looking at, we can also translate it to Alzheimer's and a lot of these other neurodegenerative diseases. So I liked that translational aspect of it.
You're in a field though that is historically dominated by white males. What are some of the biggest challenges you face as a female in this field?
Yeah. So before I even answer that, I want to say that I have been so lucky to be mentored by female scientists all throughout my research journey, like undergrad, strong female PI, head of the lab, and now my lab. It's like all four of the grad students in our lab are females, and our our PIs are female. I think the biggest part of it was my own like feelings towards it. So a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, okay, I am surrounded by women, right? And I'm working with women. But when we get out of that little bubble and I go to conferences and I go to other people's labs, it's all males.
Yes.
Like what am I doing here? And especially I'm Black and I'm Jamaican. I'm not from here. What am I doing here? Like, I felt like somebody was going to call me out and be like, hello, why are you here? But I do think that having the support of other women scientists, other strong women scientists like I have, really, really helped me to kind of not completely shut off those thoughts, but to kind of come back to myself and be like, why not? You should be here. If anything, you deserve to be here so that you can show other people who look like you and want to get to that point that it really doesn't matter. Just keep your head down and do what you need to do. That's it.
Okay. How do you maintain a good work-life balance? Is it all science and in a lab, or you do fun things? I don't know.
I do fun things. It was a very important thing for me when I was rotating and finding the lab that I wanted, for me to be in a lab where that was valued and to be working with people that also valued a work-life balance. Because leave it to me, I will be in the lab 24/7 and I just come home, go to sleep, and go back to the lab the next day. But my boss and my colleagues, we actually push each other to be like, are you feeling okay? How are you doing mentally this week? Do you need time off? That kind of thing. And so that has been really important to me, because I feel like when I need time to reset, I'm able to take the time and reset. So I go to the gym, I take cycling classes. I like to hike a lot. I like to be outside, doing creative things like playing computer games, just like random things like that. But I really value having a very good work-life balance. I don't want to be burnt out. It doesn't help anybody when you're burnt out.
Right. All right. So what's next for you? You think it will be academia? I don't know.
Boy, I wish I had the answer to that question. I wish I had the answer. So I am at the end of my third year now. And I'm trying to figure it out. I'll be honest, I don't know if I see myself in academia. Like, I don't know if I see myself having my own lab, and doing and teaching. I don't know if that's my passion. I do know that I'm really interested in translational research. So I've been working with animal models this whole time, and I do want to work with human subjects and human patients and work closely with clinicians, and potential therapeutics. So whether there's a spot for that in academia, I don't know. I have been looking into industry positions that could potentially be able to have something like that, or whether that's working for biotech company and things like that. I'm still exploring. There's apparently so much you can do with a PhD in neuroscience, and I don't know the half of it. So I'm just trying to figure out what my actual passion is, because this will be the first time that I won't be in school. I've been in school consistently like all this time. So I really need to figure out, like, where do I see myself career-wise? And it's nice because getting a PhD, you do get a lot of these skills, these amazing skills that can be translatable anywhere. But I want to make sure that I that I actually have a passion for what I do.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll figure it out though, Jhodi. I'm sure about that. So what advice do you have to leave though for women who, aspire to enter your field and who might be discouraged by, the lack of representation?
Yeah, I guess my biggest piece of advice would be to not be afraid to reach out to people that you see in that position, that look like you, that have the same passions as you, that might have been in the same position that you are in now. I think that that might have been one of the strengths in me getting a lot of the opportunities, is that I'm not afraid to cold email anybody. I literally Google people that are in positions that I want or in labs that I want. I say, hi, I'm Jhodi. I'm so-and-so. I'm interested in so-and-so. I think that, we could work well together, that kind of thing. I want to learn more about so-and-so, just things like that. Really value that. And that's how you end up networking. And that's how you end up meeting people and meeting potential mentors. I don't want to say you can't just sit down and expect it to happen.
Yeah, but you can't.
And there's value in creating a network, intentionally creating a network of people because people want to help. I love speaking to people about where I am and how I got here, because it was people that helped me, people in the position I reached out to, and that saw that I was trying to reach out to them and trying to get to where they are, that helped me. And I don't think that I could have gotten here without their help.
Yeah. So you want to thank any of those persons?
Of course. Oh, this is so long. I don't know if we have time. No, okay. So obviously my undergrad PI, Dr. Jennifer Larimore, she's the one who made me realize that I had, this interest in neuroscience, this interest in research in general. Current PI, Dr. Ashley Harms, who has been invaluable in my training, has been so supportive and just the best mentor that I could have asked for. My fellow grad students in the lab, my family, my sister, who is just always there, my mom, my auntie Odette, my best friend Garcia, who, you know, is still in Jamaica. We went to Andrews together and we talk every single day, and we've been helping each other through, you know, going through our 20s and going through, she did med school, I'm doing grad school. It's, you know, I think it's just nice to have that community that I've built of, you know, friends, family, mentors, acquaintances who continuously look out for me and, you know, have helped to keep me on the right track, even though I might get sad of home sometimes and might think that I can't do it. I'm a problem. But it's just, I feel really, really blessed to have those people.
Yeah, man. It was great talking to you though, Jhodi. I really enjoyed this interview. And I must wish you all the best with your research. And, you know, and especially, you know, coming up with some treatment for Alzheimer's, since I seem to be heading down that path.
Stop it. Listen. That's the goal. That's the goal. I hope I can. You will be fine.
But it was great talking to you, man. And thanks again.
Thank you so much. Take care.